to Viewpoint, your program that's a great scientific program. A lot of deep thoughts going on here this morning.
Don't say it.
Mrs. Busby could not be with us this morning, and you can't replace her, but in place of, you can't replace Judy. In place of Judy Busby, we have the inimitable product of Susan and Jim Ryan, one of their success stories. This guy comes from great genes. He has got the greatest set of parents you ever drew to. He really has.
We're not talking about Levi's.
No, we're talking about Jim and Sue Ryan and sister Bridget Thomas.
And let's give her a happy birthday today. I just talked to her on the phone. Happy birthday, Bridget.
I'll have to send her an email. Well, I'll do that.
May have Mr. Butler sing to her later.
Gotta go to.
You don't want that. You do not want that.
A little cleanup work today before we bring on our guest this morning. The last Saturday of the month, which would be this Saturday, this 27th, the veterans down at Chatham, Illinois, are having a hog roast fundraiser for the purpose of honor flight funds. Now, I don't know where in the heck you have a pig roast in Chatham, but I'm sure you can find it. So the hours are 12 to 7, and I'm sure they have carry-outs. Donations only. They don't have a set price. American Legion Post 75 now down in Chatham. By the way, I know that community a little bit. I have a grandson that moved down there. That's a neat community. He also found that the taxes are a little higher than they were upstate. But
that's why they got that big high school in Chatham.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm. I urge you to think about that this Saturday from 12 to 7. A nice ride in the country, as they used to say in Wild Oldsmobile up in Libertyville, Illinois. A beautiful ride in the country. By the way, that's not Bob Grau's jurisdiction up there in Libertyville, Illinois. He handles things down here in mid-state
That's
Illinois.
Right.
Okay, now another thing, a serious matter, not light at all. We all know, maybe not all of us know, but a great deal in the community remember that Melanie Shaler had a brain aneurysm and left us. A great lady, Joe Shaler's wife, she had quite a nice list of memorials. And being human like we all are, sometimes we going to do something and don't get around to it. So as a reminder, I'd like to just simply tell you some of the memorials that could be written for Melanie Shaler. And Joe and Melanie's daughter Sarah want to distribute these on July the 2nd, which is Melanie's birthday day. Mm-hmm. So let me give you some information here, please. Military Order of the Purple Heart. And Joe's going to be with us next week, talk about that. And Bob Grau is going to be with us talking about our American Legion. Melanie also suggested the American Legion Auxiliary, the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars Auxiliary, and Lincoln Community Concerts, their Harvest of Talents, the Lincoln Christian Church. So, if you haven't done anything and would like to, here's a mailing address. Melanie Shaler, Box 181 in Lincoln here, 62656, of course. So I just suggest that to you. Sometimes we intend to do things and don't get around to them. And because Joe and Sarah are going to distribute these funds to Melanie's choices the July 3rd, I just wanted to mention that to you. So now, our co-host, as I mentioned, is Mr. Ryan. You sell insurance, don't you, son?
No.
Well, there went a
will present you with
there went a commission.
He's in the industry. We don't know if he sells any, actually.
I'm not a salesman. I'll give you a lot of information. You make a decision. There you go. I don't want to sell you anything.
This morning's program brought to you by Country Financial, by the way.
Now that we get the commercial in.
Yeah, we're going to just ad-lib this commercial.
Yeah, all right. Okie dokie. Introduce our guest, Mr.
Well, with us this morning, we have a former male model. And,
I love it.
Then he went
Mrs. Butler might object to that.
Then he went into politics, and he's became very famous, our state representative, Tim Butler. And Tim, welcome to the show, and what brings you to Lincoln, Atlanta, Logan County today?
Well, anytime I can be in the trailer in rural Atlanta, I'm happy to I'm happy to do it. Actually, Bill, I've been on there several times with Bill, and he reached out. I don't know, a month or so ago. I was supposed to be on, and we had to reschedule, and so we rescheduled to late June here and everything. So here I am. Always good to be on the air and talking about whatever we happen to talk about.
Well, there's going to be some topics brought up today.
Yeah. First, let me say something. Joe mentioned Melanie Shaler, Melanie and Joe, and they've become really good friends since I've been in the legislature. Such passionate people, especially about veterans issues. And boy, what a tragic loss. I mean, Melanie was the second would be her 45th birthday, and it's just incredible to think that she's gone. But she was a wonderful lady, and I was honored to know her, and I feel really bad for Joe. I mean, it's a tough thing, but I know he'll move on and keep moving forward, and those guys just do wonderful things for our community.
Well, they had a host of friends.
Yep, absolutely.
And that was engendered by their work in the community as a pair. Joe did a great job for the veterans when he came back home, and he was able to reestablish our Veterans Assistance Office.
Yep.
And Danny Benedict has taken that job, and that's a big thing for a lot of veterans. A lot of us are out there, younger or older, doesn't make any difference, that we need some information about veterans benefits or a simple thing like a veteran's funeral. How is that conducted, and how do they go about getting that done? Which reminds me, kudo would be due to our Lincoln Legion firing squad, speaking of veterans assistance. They know what I do here in Lincoln, but they've been called to duty down in Springfield at Camp Butler several times, and they give their time, and we appreciate that very much. But in any event, I'd see Joe working at our all-veterans park there on Union Street,
yep.
And who would be on her hands and knees right there with him but Melanie.
Melanie, yeah.
So they made a great pair, and so life goes on.
Yep, life goes on. You got it.
So, Mr. Butler, 87th Legislative District. How long have you been with us now, sir?
A little over 4 years. It was March of 2015 when I was appointed to fill in after Rich Brower left, so a little over 4 years. And it's been certainly an interesting time to be in the legislature. My first 3 years were under Governor Rauner, and obviously there was a lot of contention under Governor Rauner. You had split government with the Democrats in control of the legislature, and
never the twain would meet.
And I actually had I was in some meetings this spring with some Democrat members of the House when we were talking about the Capitol bill, and they flat out said to me that they wouldn't let Rauner get a darn thing when he was in office. They weren't going to give him a thing, and so it was obviously a pretty contentious time in the legislature. We went 2 years without a budget and everything. So,
all in the best interest of the state, of course.
Only in the best interest. You got
it's
it.
a little ridiculous at times.
Yeah, but obviously with with Governor Pritzker being elected, it's a different dynamic in Springfield. Certainly for Republicans, we don't have nearly as much influence as we had with having the governor's mansion, and you kind of saw that this spring with a lot of the stuff that got passed this spring. So I've had the opportunity to have several meetings with Governor Pritzker. I think personally he seems to be a really nice gentleman. I've had good interactions with him. You can have a good conversation with him, but obviously philosophically, I don't think on most issues we don't see eye to eye a whole lot. So it's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out over the next few years. But obviously, it was a big spring for the governor this year.
Well, I think the listeners out there, they all want to talk about this and that and that. So let's just get started on things for you, Tim. You got yourself a raise this year.
Yeah, that was one of the craziest things that I've seen. So how it works in the General Assembly, and they did this a long time ago, 20 years ago or something like that, where instead of having to worry about giving legislators and elected officials, judges and things like that, a pay raise, you have a COLA every year. And so every year since I've been in.
COLA is a cost of living adjustment.
Cost of living adjustment of whatever they determine it to be, but. Every year we have the opportunity to vote against the COLA, basically. So we vote down the COLA, so we haven't, you don't get a pay raise, and which I think is the right thing to do. This year, we did not have a vote on voting down the COLA, and when the budget came through the Senate at the end of the session, the Senate Republicans realized that the COLA was still in there, and so they objected to it. And some legislation got passed over to this was the last weekend we were in session. Legislation got passed over to the House that would deny the COLA, a separate piece of legislation from the budget, and basically Speaker Madigan refused to act on it. He didn't decide to call the bill, and so the budget passed, and everybody obviously became aware of it. And we had urged the governor then he could line item the budget to take that out of there, but the governor decided to sign it. And so
what a surprise.
Lo and behold, everybody, the General Assembly will be getting a $1,600 pay raise this year. As our fine little cat walks out of the studio here, I've said my $1,600 is going to the Animal Protective League in Springfield. That's going to be where absolutely. Because
you've always said you wouldn't take a pay raise.
It's why we brought it up.
Yeah, I think I make, now that I'm in a leadership position in the House, I get an extra $10,000 a year on top of the base salary of $67,000. So I make almost $68,000, or excuse me, $78,000 a year as a legislator. That's a pretty good salary, especially for
the hours.
The median household income in my district is about $55,000 household income.
But then you have a travel expense that's in there, and sometimes that can be pretty full.
Yeah, well, so you can take mileage, you can get reimbursed for things like that. It comes out of we have an office fund too, so I pay staff and pay for office supplies, things out of an office fund. So you could take mileage out of that. I don't take mileage. I think you're
right there in the backyard, so it's your conscience. I mean, it's.
We've seen too many legislators get in trouble about their mileage.
Yeah, right.
And I never took mileage when I worked for Ray LaHood or Rodney Davis. I just, I keep track of them. I deduct them off my taxes at the end of the year as a business expense. But other than that, I ask the taxpayers to pay for that. It's
why I give you trouble about it.
Yeah, no,
because you're one of the good guys out there.
That's right. That's right. He's separate from tons of them down there. Now you mentioned Mike Madigan not taking that off the table, just leaving it. But
he hasn't been taken off the table for a long time. He got a pay raise. Yeah.
And he took it.
Yeah, exactly.
No question about that. Tim, are you in liaison from time to time, or maybe often, with Darren LaHood and other congressional representatives?
Absolutely. We, my state house district is largely covered by Congressman LaHood's district. Almost all my districts in Darren. There's about a dozen precincts in Springfield that are in Rodney Davis's district, and that happens to be where I live. I actually live in Rodney Davis's congressional district. And then on the far northwestern side of my district in Pekin, Sherry Bustos is the rep from the 17th district. So I get 3 members of Congress that come in the 87th district. Darren and Rodney and I have been friends for a long, long time. Darren LaHood was a year behind me in high school in Peoria, so I've known Darren since 1982, something like that. We've been friends for a long time, and we stay in pretty good contact with each other. I was texting with Congressman Davis yesterday. I actually saw Congressman LaHood this weekend out in Cleveland, of all places. I was in Cleveland. My wife and I were in Cleveland for the weekend for a U.S. soccer game and go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And
all right.
Darren actually brought his kids to Cleveland to go to the U.S. soccer game as well. So we saw each other on the lakefront in Cleveland, of all places, which was kind of funny. But we stay in pretty close contact on a variety of issues, so that's for sure.
How was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was really cool, and we were there for about 2.5-3 hours, which was not nearly long enough time. The thing that I was amazed about, what really hit me is when I saw Jim Morrison's handwritten lyrics for Riders on the Storm. And I'm like, man, that's cool. That was cool. what really struck me was how many they had this huge display for Jimi Hendrix. They have all this stuff from all these artists that have died and died too young. It really hit me how many of these talented people die way too young. Kurt Cobain.
There's a generational.
It's a gift.
Yeah, really, that's for sure.
That's where the generational gap comes in, unfortunately. I wouldn't walk out this door to see a rock and roll concert.
Well, you know what?
But
We're going to
that's
have to
me.
get you out, Bill. We need to get you out.
They had Hank Senior stuff there too, so that might be
There you
more
go.
up your
My
alley,
dad would
so.
love that.
Go ahead, Joe. I was going to ask something, but I don't want to step in on your lines.
No, we appreciate all you do, and I know you're out there in it all the time, and you're updating us on Facebook and popping around different places. And one of the good guys, as I'll say out there. That's why I like to pick on you a little bit. And I have more things to pick on you about.
I'm sure you do.
But let's throw some questions out there, like what's the importance of this recently passed infrastructure plan?
Yeah, it's obviously this is garnering a lot of attention because of the revenue side of it. It's a $45 billion infrastructure plan. We have not had a capital plan in Illinois for almost a decade now, and I think any of us who drive around on Illinois roads know the shape of them. I did a post on Facebook a week or so ago about 136 in the northern part of Logan County, and anybody who drives across 136 knows what bad shape that's in, and that's a federal route. It should be taken care of, but because we have not had the money to take care of it, you see that it deteriorates, and you can make a bunch of different instances where that's the case. And so I believe in infrastructure. I believe in investing in our state. I think infrastructure is the best investment we can make in our state, very honestly, outside of our educational institutions, to drive the state forward and to create a healthy economy. When you look at a place like Cisco, located in Lincoln, Illinois, they're located there for one reason: because their access to the interstates and the roads that we have. That's why they're located off the interstate there. They could easily locate somewhere else, but they've decided that helps them get their product around being located there. So I was supportive of the infrastructure plan. I think it's going to be great for the citizens of Illinois. I think it's going to be great for the economy of Illinois. But obviously there's a little bit of a pain that goes along with it too. I mean, it's a vote to increase the motor fuel tax, and I know a lot of people don't like that, but our motor fuel tax in Illinois hasn't been raised for 30 years. We haven't kept up with inflation. Projects cost more than they did 30 years ago, and we've seen the deterioration of our infrastructure. So at the end of the day, I drove 35,000 miles last year. I paid my share of motor fuel tax. I don't like paying taxes just like anybody else. I voted against almost every taxing. Other than that, I voted against every tax increase that's put in front of me. But I just thought our investment in infrastructure was the right thing to do, and I think we're gonna see a good program here over the next several years. The other thing that we've done with the funding sources that we have, it's going to be much more sustainable. Where in the past it's kind of this boom and bust cycles. You see people, you see laborers and operating engineers and these guys that build these projects. They're working for a while and then they're not working anymore. You see the engineering firms. You talk to our buddy Dave Bender, who just took a new job in D.C. with the Engineering Council. We had engineering firms that were getting ready to leave the state of Illinois or shut down their operations in Illinois because the work wasn't there for them. And this will be much more sustainable, that allow people to stay employed on that side of it, but also build a great infrastructure for the state.
Well, so there's no truth in the fact that we were letting our roads get bad so people couldn't get out of the state.
That's not the case.
Okay.
And we drove to Cleveland this weekend, and infrastructure is an issue in every state. But when you drive to Indiana, you see that Indiana raised their motor fuel tax a couple years ago by 10 cents, I believe. There's a lot of construction going on in Indiana that's based off of raising their motor fuel tax, because they need to reinvest in their highways and their infrastructure. And what a lot of people don't realize is when our interstates were built, they were built for really like about a 50-year lifespan is like the useful time that they have. and a lot of our interstates are getting to their useful lifespan, which means you can't just repave the surface of it anymore. You got to go a foot down and take out the concrete,
like up by Streeter.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
And you see this all over the place where you just can't repave it anymore, because it used to be you'd repave and it'd be good for 10 years. Now you repave it, you're lucky if it's good for 4, because the underneath part of it, the lower part of it has eroded so much, and you got to rebuild the whole thing. And that obviously that costs a lot more money to be able to do that. But that's just the place that we're in the United States right now.
Does it come down to? Sorry,
go ahead. No,
does it come down to one? How do you? So you talk about the infrastructure. How do you figure out which roads are going to get repaired?
Well, that's a great question. IDOT has a multi-year plan that they have a system where they evaluate roads, and they have a multi-year plan, and things move up the multi-year plan to try to get constructed, and it's a variety of factors that go into that, not the least of which is funding. They don't want to move a project into construction unless they know they've got the dollars to pay for it. And so there's that part of it, but there's also, I've asked for a meeting with the IDOT secretary, because I think as somebody who has supported the infrastructure plan, and somebody who I think knows the 4 counties of my district pretty well, probably a lot better than the people at IDOT know my district, I'd like to have some input on what projects they're going to look at. 136 is a great example of that. I think there's Route 9 up in Tremont. They need to widen Route 9 at the high school, because what happens is it's a 2-lane road, and kids are turning in the high school in the morning. They get rear-ended when they're turning in the high school. All we need is put in a turn lane there, and that's a state route. Stuff like that I hear from the communities that I represent. I think it's important that IDOT pays attention to that stuff, because those are the kind of projects that might not always make it up the list, that I think are important projects from the communities that I represent. So obviously I'm gonna hopefully be nagging IDOT to make sure that they take care of projects in the area that I represent, especially as somebody who supported the program. I think if you're going to want to see infrastructure in your community, you need to support the program. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, we see the. I don't understand this part of it. Were toll roads, were they built because eventually you were going to pay for that, and then they were going to go away? And then, like toll roads, they just stay in there.
I'm not positive on that, on how like the Illinois tollway got set up. If there was, if it's like the lottery and said it was going to go to education kind of thing. Yeah, but I will tell you, anyone, and I realize that it can be expensive to ride on the tolls. But I spend a fair amount of time up north because of my job. Speaker Matting likes having us up in Chicago for meetings when we're not in session instead of Springfield, unfortunately. But so I have an iPass in my car. I actually used it the whole way back from Cleveland on I-80 coming back. And when you drive some of the tollways in Chicago, even outside Chicago, the tollways in Illinois, they're in pretty good shape, and that's because they have the funding sources to be able to get it done, and those investments have been made. And there's noticeable difference between driving on the tollways in Illinois than there is on driving.
So does that money stay there?
Yes. So when you pay your tolls, that gets reinvested back into the tollway system, and so that helps them upkeep
Which
the
I'm
roads.
Okay with.
Yeah.
You always wonder. You go by and go, how long can they?
One of the things that we advocated for that I'm disappointed didn't make it in the infrastructure plan was some reforms, such as what we call managed lanes on Interstate 55 and Interstate 80, which are not toll roads. But there's talk, especially on 55, of taking some of those center lanes now that are basically shoulders when you get closer into Chicago, and making those managed lanes, which would basically be tolled lanes, to hopefully help out with some of the pressure on traffic when you come into town. So you could stay in the regular lanes if you want, but if you wanted to get in the managed lanes and pay a toll, you could do that as well, and it would help upgrade 55 too. But unfortunately, that didn't make it into the final bill, but it's something we're going to continue to push, I can tell you that.
Good.
Speaking of toll roads and so forth, I got a ticket in Chicago once.
Is there anything you can do about that?
I can't help you out on that.
No, this is long years ago when I was president of the State Association of Dry Cleaners. And I'd go to Chicago often for meetings. And going along the outer way, blue lights came on behind me, and I said, what's this? So I pulled over on the inside because I was on the inner lane. And of course, that big concrete barrier about 4 feet high standing. And the truck's going by my car and it shakes. So the officer comes up to me and he says, let me see your license. I said, yes, sir. in the process of getting my wipers, I fumbled around like a rube and dropped them at my feet. And I was all the time talking about the traffic and how bad it was. And officer, is this traffic like this every day and all this? Anyway, the bottom line, he looked at the license and says, where's Lincoln, Illinois? And I said, that's between the bean field and the corn row, sir. If you blink, you've been through it. He says, you don't come up here very often? I said, oh, God, this scares me to death. Hand me my license back. Says, I'm going to give you a pass today. You better get out of town before you get killed.
Get out before sundown.
I went to my meeting and I told the guys I just earned an Academy Award.
Come on, Bill.
Good job.
That stays with me a long time. Representative Butler, other than money, which is ever-present problem, what would you say is one of the most pressing problems to the legislature right now?
Well, I think a couple things that are always at the top of the list. Our pension obligations are a huge issue for the state of Illinois because of the pressure that it puts on the budget. Pensions are tremendously large. Our pension payments, our obligations for our public employees, are a huge part of our budget that we are constitutionally obligated to make sure that we fund every year. And so, right now we have $135 billion in unfunded pension liability because previous General Assemblies have skipped pension payments under Governor Blagojevich and things like this. There was pension holidays, and then under Governor Edgar before that, when the last time they kind of revised some of the pension payments, they created this so-called ramp for the pension payments, which is exactly what it sounds like. Every year we have increasing requirements that we need to put into the pension system. So it's a huge issue for us. We before I was in the General Assembly, there was some changes to the pension program that were made to try to help with that. There was a court case that came out of it. It ended up in the Supreme Court. The Illinois Supreme Court said, no, you can't make those changes because in our Constitution it says you shall not diminish pension and benefits, and it's pretty straightforward from the 1970 Constitution. So we're really handcuffed with what we have to pay for pensions, which then really eats into all the other money that we have for programs throughout the state of Illinois. That's probably the number one issue that faces us.
Well, then will our governor's tax plan, progressive tax plan, will that help that?
Well, supposedly the governor's tax plan will help that. I have. It was
a good word you used.
I have real problems and I'm very skeptical about his progressive tax proposal. The legislature passed. The voters have to change the Constitution to be able to go to a graduated income tax. So there's different levels. Currently, we have a flat tax in the state of Illinois at 4.95%, and I think the flat tax is the way to go. There's a lot of talk about how the governor's plans the fair tax. I think there's nothing more fair than everybody pays the same percentage, no matter if you make $50,000 or $20,000 or $200,000. You're paying the same percentage of your salary, and I think there's nothing more fair than that to help
people
contribute.
Don't object to this percentage business. I don't think they object to that. I don't think they do.
Yeah,
but just adding another $25,000 a year on something just arbitrarily, it doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that don't work well, I'm not working very well for our sponsors. And if I don't turn this mic over to Mr. Ash, we're done. Go right ahead, James. Welcome back to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We have all of the above this morning. Our guest this morning, Representative Tim Butler, the 87th Legislative District. Now, I'm going to make a personal comment, if I may, Mr.
You go right ahead.
We have been exceptionally well, we meaning the electorate, have been exceptionally well served here by Mr. Butler, and I'm not trying to stroke him at all. I don't have anything that I need. I just appreciate the fact that he works at his job. He's present in Logan County for many functions that he doesn't have to be here, but he's here representing the people, and I appreciate that. So, and the other, sitting in, not replacing, sitting in, my co-host, not replacing Judy Busby, was the inimitable and irreplaceable Joe Ryan, who doesn't sell insurance, but he'll give you advice.
There you go. information. Knowledge is power, right?
All right, go right ahead, Joe.
Hey, well, let's talk about the biggest one now. I understand there was a smoke-in down at the State House.
No free samples were given.
Let's talk about this marijuana industry.
It's amazing. If you were to ask me, if you were to ask me a few weeks out if the governor would get a lot of his big items done on the agenda, I would say no way. There was still a lot of big stuff left on his agenda the last few weeks going in there, but everything that he had on his agenda pretty much passed, including adult use recreational cannabis, which is we are the first state out of 11 that have made recreational legal. We are the first state to do it through the legislative process. All the 10 other states that passed it actually did it by voter citizen-led referendum on the ballot, and then the legislature had to come in afterwards to make up the laws for it. So we're the first state to actually do it legislatively, which I don't know if that's a black mark or a gold star for us. I'm not sure. Look, at the end of the day, I've been very supportive of our medical program. I think that's been a good program that we've done the right way.
I agree.
We have a facility here in Lincoln. Obviously, Cresco is has been part of the medical program. I also have a facility in Delavan, a growing facility in Delavan. I think I'm the only member of the House that has two growing facilities in a district. So it's an issue that when I got in the legislature, I really hadn't thought a whole heck of a lot about, but got into a district where it's a big part of the economy. When you go up to Delavan, I think they're almost at 70 jobs now at the place in a town of 2,000 people.
That's a big deal.
In Lincoln, I think they're around 30 employees that they have at that facility right now. And you're going to see that expand dramatically. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I could see where Cresco could be eventually one of the larger employers in Lincoln. I really could.
Is it
A side issue, and we're going to need that too, by the way.
Yeah.
My son Greg is a retired warden, and he has a friend who pretty well healed, I guess, and he have a medical marijuana dispensary up in Fulton County in Canton, and the money they handle is incredible.
Yeah.
And all cash money, of course. No checks, no debit cards.
Is that a problem?
Well, it is a big problem, and when you talk to the industry people, when you talk to the agencies that oversee it, AG's one of the big agencies that oversee it, and Department of Revenue. There have been no problems of it basically being an all-cash business, which is pretty amazing to think that now that's been in place for 5 or 6 years. They really haven't any problems, but it continues to be an issue because of the federal restriction on it being a Schedule I drug. So banks are very leery to be involved with that. We have had some banks in Illinois that have supported the medical program, state chartered banks, not federal.
It can't be federal.
Yeah, no. State chartered banks. But at the end of the day, I wasn't supportive of the recreational bill. I think it was an overly broad bill. I think it's way too expansive. I talked to I represent all the 4 counties: Tazewell, Menard, Logan, Sangamon. I talked to the sheriffs in all 4 counties. I had good conversations with Sheriff Landers, with Sheriff Lauer up in Tazewell County as well, and they have some legitimate concerns, I think, about enforcement, about DUIs, because we do have a DUI standard for cannabis, but there's really no way to measure it outside of a blood draw. Which isn't going to. There's no breathalyzer for pot, and so that's going to be a real issue. And I think the fact that this expungement issue, that this became a social justice issue for a lot of my colleagues in the legislature, and I think this expungement issue really was way too expansive on letting people off on previous convictions that they've had for a variety of things, and I think that's a big concern. And I just at the end of the day, I just don't think it was the right approach. That's why I opposed it.
And the laws aren't in place, right, to govern it all?
Yeah, so the law was just signed yesterday. It will become effective January 1. So starting January 1, and existing facilities will have a leg up on. So existing dispensaries and growing facilities have a leg up. So I would assume on January 1. you could go into a dispensary as long as they decide they want to go recreational. So you could go into HCI in Springfield and probably buy recreational, but the rules have to still be written for it as well. So the process is the bill's passed, but you have to go through a rule making process as well. So that's going to be an extensive process.
I don't know how you define, quote, good stuff. But my son says Cresco sells good stuff.
Well, we thought you were talking about your high school days.
No, never. Heck, I was a naive kid. Still a naive old geezer. But
you've been around long enough to know before it was a Schedule I drug.
Exactly. By the way, once again, the old fella sat here almost in that 45 minutes and haven't used the call-in number, 648-5510. Somebody might want to either lambaste the hell out of Representative Butler or say something nice about him or ask a reasonable question. Now, I emphasize reasonable question and don't get personal. 648-5510 is your time to call in to talk to Representative Tim Butler.
I would say one thing when you say about the good stuff. One of the most impressive things, like if you tour Cresco, if you tour Delavan, I mean they're pretty impressive state-of-the-art facilities. I mean these aren't like two guys in dreadlocks under a plastic sheet out back.
Jeez, Sean,
I mean these are real. The place in Delavan has a $3 million lab in it. I mean and it was a $22 million facility. It's legitimate stuff. And when you look at a canister, when you buy product, because they obviously have toured these places and I've seen how they package it. When you buy a canister of cannabis from a medical program, it's got a label on the back that tells you exactly what it is. It tells you the THC levels. It tells you the cannabinoids in it. And I do think that's been a good thing and should be a good thing for the program because people do know what they're getting. We saw again. I voted against it, but I also see there's some legitimate things going on here. We saw up in Peoria last year where these people were buying stuff on the street that they thought they were buying pot, and they're buying Spice or K2, and these people are bleeding out of the ears and all this kind of stuff. This would allow them at least to go in legitimately to buy something and know what you're buying. Now, I don't know if that makes the program right, but at least it does bring a little bit level of knowing what you're getting there.
Well, and then the other question I had to piggyback on that was, we talk about all the money. We're going to make all this money off of it. Do we know what we're doing with that?
Yeah,
money?
I haven't seen a good projection yet on what the revenue is going to be,
or where it's going.
Well, a fair chunk of it will go into the general revenue fund in the state of Illinois to help us with our expenses. There is some money set aside for law enforcement and for communities. There's some money going back to the communities through the local government distributive fund. And another problem I had with the bill is the fact that they're using some of the money. They're going to use state money to help people get up, especially as they say, disadvantaged communities get up and going and with facilities. So you're going to see state grants back to communities to build, dispensaries and things like this, probably largely in Chicago. When it's still a Schedule I drug on that's still kind of federally illegal. So that's a real issue for me, is the fact that we're having state grant programs, which is going back to help these facilities when it's still kind of a federally, a Schedule I issue. So, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fair amount of revenue. I don't think it's going to be as much revenue as they expect it to be, but we'll see. But a big chunk of it will go to the general revenue fund in the state.
Well, if we keep track of it, I guess it could help.
Yeah.
And we're going to be able to gamble too, right?
That's their gambling expansion in the state of Illinois. There was a new gaming bill that went through that basically will double the positions of gaming in the state of Illinois. It allows for several new casinos, including one in Danville, one in Rockford, one down in southern Illinois in Williamson County. It also, for me, one of the things that I was glad to see we get in there, we have what is now called the State Fair Gaming Act, which allows for 30 additional days, potentially, of harness racing at the fairgrounds, which hopefully will help stimulate the horse industry, because the state fairgrounds still have a good amount of people that train their horses. shows out there, as well as it'll allow for some video gaming machines in the beer tents during the fair, which that revenue will go back into a fund to help the infrastructure of the fairgrounds. That's why we put it together, to try to help the fairgrounds.
But the fairgrounds needs help.
The video games gambling to me is, for want of a better word, it's immoral. And the reason I say that so strongly is that we all know what addiction is. And video game gambling can be the same type of addiction as marijuana or drug, any other kind of drug, or alcohol.
Yeah.
It's an addiction.
I agree.
And we're taking money from people's tables who can ill afford it.
Yeah.
And that's what that's where I come in on.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm not a gambler. I think that doesn't appeal to me, but I do agree that some of these things are very, very addictive. The one positive thing on that front is we have not funded our addiction services very well in the state of Illinois. It's been under $1 million annually. We upped that to, I think, $6 million in this budget to allow it to combat the addiction when it comes to gambling. I think that's a good thing. But I agree with you. We got to watch that, and we have to give abilities. We have to give the ability of the video operators, the bars and the restaurants, the ability to turn people away if they know that they're addicted. And we currently don't allow that. We do that at our casinos, but we don't do it. We don't allow it with the video.
That's kind of a fine science, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
Okay.
But we have the ability to. We should have the ability to do that.
So last question for me, favorite all-time band? There we go.
I got to say Foo Fighters. I'm a big Foo Fighters
Foo Fighters,
fan.
really?
Foo Fighters. I've seen Foo Fighters, I think, 8 times now, and everything. And I would say that's probably. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I love grunge music. So I would say Foo Fighters are probably my favorite band.
Your fans are wanting to know what it was.
You don't sit around on Saturday night and listen to Lawrence Welk.
I did when I was a kid. That's only because my parents probably were had it on and everything. I will say, because of my dad, I am a big band fan. Absolutely. My dad was a World War II vet, and he was a big band fan. He also is the reason I love Bing Crosby at Christmas, I can tell you that.
Tim Butler, representative of the 87th Legislative District, doing a what of a job for us.
Thank you, sir.
And he's never refused an invitation to come up and appear on Viewpoint. He makes time. He finds time. So we appreciate that. Say nice things about him when you see him on the street. And thank him for his efforts. He may not be always right. None of us are. But by gosh, he's in there pitching away. So thank you very much, Tim.
Absolutely. Always fun to be on here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming in.
Sure thing.